just say hi, I guess. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, so for those who don't know you, and the Northern Broadcasting Service has a lot of different feeds going out. Tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about yourself.
So I'm mostly active in the World Assembly, mostly in the General Assembly. I've also done a few Security Council resolutions. On so on the nation Magecastle Embassy Building A5, I did some things in TMP. I was World Assembly Minister for a few months last year. It was after the mass resignations from Garundu. I succeeded, I think, Chipoli, and then resigned about in halfway through the second term to Simone. Now I'm mostly active in Greater Dienstad, which I think DMP has a treaty with, and I still occasionally write some resolutions. In December last year, I was appointed to the General Assembly Secretariat, so that means I get to rule on proposals and in the General Assembly. And over the last few months, we've been working on some rule changes, which are going through now.
Yeah, so how did you find your how was your experience in TMP? I know you still have TMP, you're still on the executive staff, and there's been a lot of technologies on the Ministry of World Assembly Affairs front that's been, courtesy of you, and I thank you for that. As your successor in the MoWAA. So how did you find your experience in TMP?
I think I'm happy with what I managed to do in TMP during that time. So obviously the main thing would have been in creating the tech for the World Assembly Ministry, which we still use. I think the other people involved with that were Kashchovia in 9003. I think the main thing I didn't like, and which was a lot of why I'm not really active there anymore, is having to deal with a lot of the gameplay affairs. I used to be pretty active in that about 3 years ago, but not so much now. And I didn't really enjoy that. Towards the end of when I was minister, there was also some real life factors which made it harder to continue, and that was a lot of why I resigned. I think since now mostly active in Greater Dienstad, it's quite nice not actually being directly involved in the drama, even if I occasionally like to comment on it and as part of the peanut gallery, I guess.
Yeah, certainly um, your achievements in tech in the Ministry of Foreign Assembly Affairs has been very influential. The the TG systems are still being used. I think Castrovian and 9003 are the three using it now. The important or during your time in before we move on to talking about the GA General Assembly Secretariat.
In I think the most important event that would have happened was, I guess, actually it was one of the first that happened when I was active in TMP, was the resignation of Haldum and all the fallout from that over the incident with TSP. I guess it didn't really,
Yeah, that
yes,
was
it didn't really
yeah.
affect me personally, I guess, but it was still a rather important part of event that happened. I think the second similar one would have been the resignation of Garundu and also the fallout from that.
Yeah, that was certainly a more dramatic time for TMP, for lack of a better word. And we both lived through that, and
Honestly,
in
I
different
guess the
capacities,
reason I'm not
obviously.
mentioning the incident with TCB and all that is because really what was happening there was a lot more gradual. And by the time the delegate tip happened, the two regions were already in quite a tense situation. We had just proscribed TCB and all that. So really the build up to actual war wasn't a very major one compared to what we already were dealing with.
Well, yeah, I guess the TCP situation was much more long term in
Yes,
nature,
it
as
wasn't
you
really
mentioned.
one particular
And
incident.
so, tell us about the GA Secretariat. So I see that you guys have been passing a lot of you guys have been legislating a bit more on changing the GA rules, as I've been joking about it on the NSWA Discord. So tell us about what you're doing in GA Gen Sec, obviously to the extent that is permitted, you're permitted to say within the rules of NS.
Yes, the rule changes I think have been a project for a while. So when I was first appointed to the body, one of the first things I wanted to do was to change the metagaming rule to address the issue with specificanen about, I think, 2 years ago now. EP challenged, no, EP wrote a proposal which tried to ban one of my religion in my nation. It didn't get vote or anything, and it was actually marked illegal in the queue. But the ruling from GenSec was that it was legal. So by then, in December, we changed the rule so that it was explicitly illegal in the rule text. I think one of the counter arguments to making that illegal was that it wasn't very clear from the actual rule text, and honestly, I'm inclined to agree with that from the old rule text. So the new one now explicitly says that specificanen is illegal. After that, there were also some other rule changes that I wanted to do, and plus also IA had quite a few old ones. So, for example, the recent one about relevance and veracity, that was originally from a discussion in about 2021, I think. So most of the wording was IAs. But so I wanted to actually get that implemented at some point. So I posted a thread in the private forum, which had quite a few different changes. Not just relevance and veracity, which were written before, but also, for example, changing amendments to something and moving around some of the rules. A lot of those are the ones you're seeing now, which are being posted. So, for example, the amendment change, which was posted yesterday, that was from that set of changes. We decided to split it up into lots of different consultations. There were also so contradiction, duplication, and a few others. Don't remember. Yes, new legislation, contradiction, duplication, and operative clause. Those were all proposed by IA, and a lot of them have been implemented now. Others are still in the consultation stage. Actually, no, they're not. No, they've gone through the 14-day consultation period, but haven't been implemented yet. So that's what's happening with contradiction and new legislation. There's a few more rule changes which are inbound. So the main one would be contradiction, which we decided not to finalize it, but there might be a new consultation coming up because the community consensus was very divided on that, and there were lots of loud voices, particularly as to subordination clauses. There's the other one, which will be coming up soon, is about changing the rule categories. So, for example, proposal basics, mechanics, and such, to make it clear which apply to which kinds of proposals. So, for example, the repeals basics category will apply only to repeals, and proposal basics will apply only to new proposals, with, of course, the rules moved around so that the descriptions are accurate. I think this was commented around by 1,000 Branches from a few years ago. There's quite a few typos in the rule text. So, for example, one of the rules amendment, I think, says appeals when it should say repeal, so those will also be corrected. Outside of that, I think it's been quite a litigious period in terms of legality challenges. We've had to rule on, I think, 5 proposals over the last half year already. Before, in 2023, or 2022, there were not that many challenges. So recently we've had to put out a few rulings a bit more often. Although obviously I don't know how that compares to the workload before. I wasn't on GenSec then.
Right. Yeah. So wanted to talk to you about the two things that you mentioned. I guess one is the contradiction rule because obviously there was a lot of feedback over whether general subordination clauses were were applicable. And also, I think I was going to raise a point over whether extant resolutions were meant previously extant or extant at the time the resolutions passed, or whether that applies forward. There's some issues around that. I'll get to the other part, which is the workload of the GenSec in the next question. But what do you think about the contradiction rule, and why do you think the community is having some difficulty with with this rule change, and what are your personal thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think from day one, it seems to have the idea of subordination clauses and whether they should be legal has been rather contentious in the community. Obviously, this wasn't the first time it came up. I think at the start of the year, VARA posted a repeal of of the blood sport resolution, and one of the arguments was that it had a subordination clause. Even before that, I think Minskiev or someone also yes, it was Minskiev with the euthanasia resolution 2 years ago. He also brought up the issue, and there was some debate on it on the World Assembly server. So when the rule did say directly that they would be legal, obviously we ruled on this we, meaning the old GenSec, and obviously if I was on it, I would have recused as it was my proposal. GenSec ruled that the subordination clauses were generally legal as long as they affected only a small part of a proposal's hypothetical effect. There wasn't too much debate on that, although if you look at the thread, there were still some exchanges of long text walls around it between Ken Mori and I and a few others. But the rule change was meant to one of the things it would have done was to actually codify it in the rule text. So because the idea of subordination clauses is already controversial, the camp that thinks they are bad obviously wouldn't want that they're no longer just legal. Now GenSec has to actually change the rule text for them to be illegal instead of just providing a ruling that overturns the old precedent.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and I think the community is still evaluating that. Yeah, don't. This is our Northern Broadcasting Service, hosted by the North Pacific region, and of course, don't forget to endorse your delegates, Simon Republic, and your vice delegate, Tripoli, and the rest of the Security Council. On episode 2, Magecastle, The Ice States, will continue to talk about experience in GenSec and other matters. So please stay tuned for the next episode.